The official backstory to the WipEout series has never been particularly prevalent in the games themselves. Usually the only place you can read up any kind of backstory on the games is in the manuals or on the official websites. The aim of this video is to bring all of the official backstory together. Trying to link it all together though was not an easy task, and there's some places where I've had to try and fill the gaps in myself. But what I am trying to present to you here is a backstory that is as true to the original as it can possibly be. If you do wish to research any further into these backstories, have a look in the manuals for the past games, or on some of the official websites if they are still active. There are also some documents from one of the original writers of the series, Damon Fairclough, available on WipEout's own. So if you're looking for the backstories for a particular team, click on one of the links that you see now. Alternatively, there are a set of time links available in the video description. If you're looking for the backstories for Tigron Enterprises or G-Tech Systems, you'll find them in the sections for Kyrex and AG Systems respectively. Otherwise, let's kick off with one of the oldest teams in the series, Physar. Federal European Industrial Science and Research, more commonly known as Physar. The founding of Physar was a much calmer affair than the formation of Oricom and Kyrex, although it was much more of a knee-jerk reaction than a seriously thought-out plan. When AG Systems were bought out and relocated to Japan, Europe was left without an AG team. Not wanting to be left behind, the European Federation financed the formation of Physar to fill the gap left by AG Systems. They were by no means hard done by in terms of money, and they were able to entice several key members of AG Systems to remain with them. However, their primary target, Pierre Belmondo, was not interested in money and chose to remain with AG Systems. Unfortunately, the words Physar and success were almost mutually exclusive in the early years, always seeming to fill the gap behind the larger teams. This fueled accusations that they didn't have the stomach for serious competition. This wasn't helped by the fact that Physar did not have a single base of operations due to an inability by member nations to agree on one. The entire operation of hardware, researchers, engineers, administrators and race crew were constantly travelling from one temporary base to another in a bid to keep each member nation happy, and they were bound by contract to spend at least 3 weeks in one of 12 different locations every year. It was widely said that Physar winning a season wouldn't just be a great achievement, it would be a miracle. Despite all this though, Physar have a well-respected reputation of bringing through some of the highest profile pilots in AG racing due to their craft's ease of use. While the majority of these pilots went on to bigger and better things with the more successful teams, their contribution to the team while they were there began to propel Physar up through the league rankings. Despite a few financial setbacks along the way, they were able to secure a number of high-profile pilots in the run-up to the F9000 championships, and proclaimed that it would become their most successful period in their history. They were not to disappoint, with lead pilot Daniel Johnson securing medal positions alongside Zios and Piranha on a number of occasions. However, their performance was overshadowed by allegations of corruption within the F9000 organisation, and rumours of race fixing and money laundering. When the league collapsed, Physar quickly made moves to distance themselves from these events. They managed to weather the storm and return to commercial AG development until the dawn of the new FX300 league. Grabbing the opportunity to return to AG racing following the formation of the new league by the Belmondo Foundation, Physar made their return with a variant of their well-known LS model. Despite competition from one of their former member states when Great Britain broke away in 2193 to resurrect Icarus, they chose to stick with their tried and tested configuration of a high-thrust, tight-handling craft. They quickly established themselves in the FX300, excelling on the new narrower technical circuits such as Citanuova and Sabenko Climb. They continued into the FX400 League many years later, and with their new Fury class craft currently being tested in the FX350 events with a higher top-end speed, it seems Physar are preparing themselves to challenge the top teams once again. Physar have become synonymous with AG racing, and with Oricom's late arrival to the FX400 League, they are the only team to have had a presence in every single season since the inception of the professional championships way back in 2048. Anti-gravity systems. Originally a European organisation, AG Systems were the first company to develop anti-grav vehicles for commercial use, and were the pioneers of the majority of AG technology seen in the world. They were founded by Pierre Belmondo in 2017, and because of his philosophy of developing the technology for the good of mankind, they have always valued technological experimentation over racing prowess. They were also indirectly responsible for the formation of 3 other teams. When AG Systems were bought by a Japanese consortium, the gap left in Europe was filled by Pfizer. Oricom and Kyrex were both formed by 2 AG Systems employees who were forced to resign after they publicly fell out over the direction AG Systems should be moving in. AG Systems were renowned for their inconsistency, as their ongoing research led to frequent changes in the craft, sometimes as often as between races. Despite this though, most of their pilots remained loyal, confident in the knowledge that they were the envy of many associated with the sport in being able to sample the newest AG technology before anybody else could even dream of it. It remained obvious though that AG Systems was much more concerned with research than racing, and their success on the track was usually short-lived. This approach to AG racing was not to last. Eventually, AG Systems fell victim to their own inconsistency. Their lack of success for many years led the company to declare bankruptcy, and the team which personified the sport itself was no more. What was left of the team was subsequently bought up by GTEC Systems in 2155 to compete in the F9000 League. While this did keep the company competing, it was at the expense of everything they stood for. GTEC were money obsessed, openly admitting that they intended to buy success in the league regardless of how much it would cost them. This, coupled with the death of Pierre Belmondo, was the final straw for many old AG Systems fans who soon turned their back on GTEC, convinced that the soul of AG racing had finally perished. GTEC's arrogance, though, would eventually be their undoing. The collapse of the league revealed colossal financial irregularities in GTEC's accounts, suggesting that they were effectively being funded solely through backhanders from the corrupt Overtel Corporation. When this emerged, they had absolutely no defence. GTEC was shut down on the spot. From the ashes of GTEC, the phoenix of a new AG Systems arose. In 2171, the team were reformed, going back to the philosophy of their founder and their roots in AG racing. Due to their long absence, their reintroduction to the league was a shaky one, especially competing with those long-standing teams that survived the fall of the F9000. However, over the years they grew in confidence, and later went on to win the 2206 season following the disqualification of Triakis. A series of strong performances in the FX350 class events, coupled with confidence-inspiring pre-season testing for the FX400 League, showed that their 2206 FX300 championship title was no fluke. Their strong position in the FX400 League shows the resilience of a team who deserved to be at the forefront of the sport, and considering their founder was the man responsible for the existence of AG technology in the first place, there are few who could argue. Oricom Research Industries. The founding of Oricom was a direct result of the forced resignation of 2 prominent AG Systems employees. Following a heated exchange with Holtz McQueen over the proposed future path of AG Systems, Delia Flaubert left the company and founded US-based Oricom within a year. Flaubert shared Pierre Belmondo's vision of a technological advancement for the benefit of all rather than for profit, and as such, Oricom is dedicated to maintaining Belmondo's philosophy. This was her side of the argument while she was still locking horns with McQueen, and as such, Belmondo sympathised with her. However, as the situation had become so volatile, Belmondo had no choice but to dismiss both. As a result of this, Oricom and Kyrex have always held a fierce rivalry. This was also seen between both sets of pilots for much of the early years of the league, the most notable of which was during the F3-600. There were constant rumours that second pilot Anastasia Cherevsky was a spy for Kyrex, and the Tetsuo twins made no secret of their personal vendetta with each other. This even spilled out of the racing environment when Kyrex launched a smear campaign against Oricom's lead pilot Ariel Tetsuo following her increase in popularity among young fans. During the transition into the F9000, Oricom saw themselves as the sole remaining guardians of Belmondo's vision following the collapse of AG Systems. However, their stance on the spirit of AG racing was starting to become somewhat of an irritant to a number of other teams. Tigron naturally opposed them after taking control of Kyrex, but other newer teams such as Xios also openly mocked them. This reached a peak when Xios were able to poach Natasha Belmondo from Oricom, claiming that when one of Pierre Belmondo's own descendants ends up deserting them, they're clutching at straws. The constant barrage of criticism led Oricom to develop a significantly heavier craft, intending to tear apart anyone who dared stray from the Belmondo ideals. Tigron will be the ones to feel this pent-up anger the most, with races frequently being dominated by heated battles which often ended up in eliminations. It was said that the cost of replacing destroyed craft from these two teams over the course of only a few seasons ran into the billions. The collapse of the F9000 was almost a relief for Oricom, as to them it signalled the end of the betrayal of Belmondo's vision. They returned to commercial AG development until the dawn of the FX300 League, where they felt duty bound to return. This was further fuelled by the re-emergence of Kyrex under new ownership. However, their long absence from the racing circuit had begun to take its toll. The new ships struggled to compete with their rivals' new efforts, and some of the newer teams such as Triakis were gaining a significant foothold. As a result, they withdrew from the early seasons of the FX350 and 400 events to refine their craft. Naturally, this drew accusations from all corners that Oricom could no longer handle the competition. The smiles were soon wiped off their rivals' faces when they returned, with the new Fury class craft proving that it could more than match anything else on the track. Like Faisal, Oricom have been a near permanent fixture on the AG racing circuit, and whatever anyone thinks of their motivations for competing, or their sometimes evangelical approach to protecting Belmondo's vision, they are nonetheless an iconic team. Kyrex Research and Development. Where Oricon were born on the principle of maintaining Belmondo's philosophy, Kyrex were born on profit-led principles. Founder Holst McQueen was originally a member of Pierre Belmondo's research team at AG Systems, and witnessed first-hand the commercial demand for AG technology. As interest from the private companies grew, McQueen scorned Belmondo's naivety in ignoring the profitability of the technology, and ended up clashing viciously with his fellow researcher Delia Flaubert. This exchange ended up costing him his job at AG Systems. McQueen travelled to Russia and outlined plans to Kyrex Industries for a racing team so that Flaubert's new Oricon team would not remain unchallenged. Kyrex was just a single cog in the machine that was the Overtel Corporation. Their only concern was the maximisation of audiences at any cost necessary. As a result, Kyrex enjoyed almost limitless funding, and with McQueen as the team's managing director, Kyrex went on to become the most successful team in AG racing history. Their lead pilot, Kel Solar, to this day is widely regarded to be the greatest AG pilot of all time, and the bitter rivalry between Ariane Tetsuo and her twin sister Ariel, the lead pilot for Oricon, made for some incredibly heated encounters. Kyrex's craft traditionally were very heavy and required a lot of skill to pilot. As a result, very few pilots came through Kyrex's own ranks. The majority were poached from other teams on the promise of money and success. Rebranding themselves as Kyrex Research and Development, they cemented their dominance all the way up to the end of the F7200 era. At the dawn of the F9000, Overtel finally managed to gain control over the race commission. In doing so, Kyrex were unceremoniously absorbed into Tigron Enterprises in 2149. Where Kyrex were considered to be aggressive in their methods, Tigron were morally bankrupt. They immediately set out to cause as much damage as they could to the opposition, and targeted Oricon as a matter of principle. An intercepted memorandum from the company claimed that they would buy lead pilot Omar Kumala his own diamond farm if he put Oricon out of business for good. During the takeover, Tigron managed to uncover all manner of illegal activities that Overtel had engaged in while they were in control of Kyrex. As a result, they had all the information they needed to blackmail Overtel into allowing them to actively flaunt the rules. This went as far as fixing races in the later years, but as a result they ended up signing their own death warrant. An official investigation into Overtel's activities put everything into the public, including all of Tigron's machinations. The last F9000 race was stopped halfway through, and Overtel's administrators took the easy way out. Tigron were finished, and the old Kyrex production facilities lay derelict. In 2179, a young Russian businessman named Felix Levovich bought up the production facility and resurrected Kyrex. His father was heavily involved with the company before the takeover by Tigron, and he immediately set out to restore the old team to its former glory. However, the new craft had to be a markedly different beast to the old models, as the enormous funding enjoyed by Kyrex in the past was no longer available. His new craft was a much more balanced machine, more accessible to pilots of all abilities. As a result, they were able to gain a foothold in the new FX300 League and work their way up from there. One final Tigron craft remained from the old facilities, which was also used in a bid to condition their pilots to heavier ships, but it was scrapped once it had served its purpose. Levovich wanted no remnants of Tigron to remain. Fortunes have changed for Kyrex when the FX350 and 400 events came about. They've acquired a large number of sponsors since their reformation, and are on course to reclaim their position at the front of the pack. And as long as Oricon are still racing, Kyrex will always be there to bring them down. The rivalry between Flaubert and McQueen still lives on to this day. Piranha advancements. Piranha were formed as a result of the amalgamation of two smaller Brazilian teams, Pia and Hana, in 2040. Their initial foray into AG racing in the inaugural championships in 2048 showed a lot of promise for one of the younger teams competing, but they mysteriously disappeared from the circuit when the F3600 League began. The company relocated to China, providing air brake technology to AG Systems and Oricom for use in their F3600 craft. However, this was all a front for their true activities. The company re-emerged in 2060 and development began on what they described as the perfect AG racer. This monstrous craft emerged in the F5000 to the astonishment of the other teams. It carried no weapon technology, but it was by far the fastest and most agile craft the league had ever seen. However, the cost to build these craft was astronomical, and finding pilots that were talented enough to fly them was incredibly difficult when trying to compete with Kyrex's financial muscle. When the F7200 League came about, Piranha relocated to their native Brazil and developed a more sedate craft. The methods that went into the development were kept a close secret. No press conferences were ever given, and any communication that was released by the team tended to be particularly ambiguous. But there was this constant theme of perfection behind all of Piranha's motivations. The F9000 saw Piranha take this idea to the extreme. The rise of Aries Piermont to the chair of the company, along with the acquisition of Assegai Developments, allowed them to produce some of their finest work. Their craft were immensely fast, and with the stabilisation technology acquired from Assegai, they were very agile as well. But despite a phenomenal win percentage and consistent high-placed finishes, Piermont was not happy. He claimed that only through reaching true perfection would he ever allow himself the luxury of a smile. This approach took a major financial toll on the company, and when the F9000 League collapsed and AG racing ground to a halt, Piranha were left with no outlet for their research. A number of years of uncertainty followed. The company were forced to sell Assegai back to the United African Nations, and eventually were taken over by the Brazilian government. But the re-emergence of AG racing gave new life to the team. Without the financial backing they enjoyed as a private company, they were unable to exploit the ideas of perfection they previously held dear. However, they still had a reputation to keep as being the fastest team on the circuit, a reputation that needed defending now that Icarus had a claim to that title. They entered the FX300 with an uncharacteristically heavy craft not seen since their early days in the AGRC, but with an undisputed top-end speed that even Icarus had to play second fiddle to. They continued into the FX400 League with a similar craft, and with a new Fury class craft currently doing the rounds in the FX350 League, Piranha are doing all they can to ensure that they will dominate the circuit once again. Assegai Developments. Assegai were formed in 2113 following an invite from the AG League to the United African Nations just prior to the inauguration of the F7200. It was an attempt to give the AG circuit truly international representation, and the success of African pilots already racing for the current lineup suggested that this would be an important development. Taking their name from an African long spear, Assegai chose to recruit only pilots from the African nations, and as such were instrumental in greatly enhancing the sport's international development. They entered the F7200 with possibly the most agile craft ever seen in AG racing, able to navigate technical circuits with a finesse that even Faisal struggled to match. Such a technological achievement from a relative newcomer to the league caught the eyes of the larger, more established teams. Most notable of them were Piranha, who bought out Assegai prior to the start of the F9000 in 2150. When Assegai was sold back to the United African Nations following Piranha's decline in 2181, they experimented with a number of different designs over the course of the following 20 years. Their FX300 craft was markedly different to their iconic F7200 model, addressing the largest complaint from their pilots at the time, the shields. Unfortunately, they were forced to compromise on the handling that they were so well known for, and the craft ended up a mid-pack runner. This changed in the FX400. Assegai wanted to return to their high agility model but were struggling as before with durability. By partnering themselves with Triakis, they were able to develop new shield technology that allowed them to significantly improve durability without compromising the craft's agility. This allowed them to focus on the outright speed of the craft for the new Fury prototype currently being tested in the FX350 League. Assegai have a consistent all-rounder on their hands. Goteki 45. Goteki 45 originated from a heavily shielded base of operations on the island of Makana in the Pacific Islands. Over the course of their tenure in the F7200, Goteki were known to hire pilots with a tendency to favour violence over racing skill, and were regarded as something of a disruptive influence. Their ships were kitted out with the strongest shielding of any craft competing, and they set out to cause absolute carnage rather than having any real aspiration to race. There were rumours abound that the team had been established purely to undermine the league. However, before an official investigation could be launched, their base was levelled by an unknown bomber squadron in 2137, and to this day no one has taken responsibility. It was possible one of the teams had taken matters into their own hands. Following the regeneration of Makana for the inaugural FX300 series, Goteki were reformed under new leadership and set out to establish themselves as a serious contender to undo the damage caused by their predecessors. Not just in terms of the team's reputation, but that of the whole island. Their new design showed familiar characteristics to their old F7200 model, but their thrust technology was completely unmatched. Goteki frequently took the early lead during races, but the endurance of the more well-established teams showed, and they ended up finishing in the mid-pack more often than not. However, the financial muscle Goteki obtained from the FX300 gave them resources on par with the other leading teams as they entered the FX400 series. The new facilities at their base of operations on Makana were literally packed with cutting-edge equipment, and the newly developed FX350 and FX400 class craft showed a mix of good handling balance and incredible acceleration in pre-season testing. This led Goteki 45 Director of Operations Kao Manamaluna to announce the team's new motto as future-proof. And this is before their Fury class prototype is considered too, which provides a lighter chassis without sacrificing durability. From a rogue outfit to an established FX400 competitor, Goteki 45 have come a long way. Icarus. Icarus was formed as a pet project of the English businessman Bernston Burns. He always had a love of publicity stunts, perfectly illustrated by the 2 extra eyes in the top of his forehead to launch his digital spectacles company 4Eyes. He stunned the F7200 committee by building and registering a new AG team from scratch in only 7 months. This was mainly due to large contributions from various manufacturers around the world willing to take part in the project. What they created was a craft that was built for one thing: pure speed. Unfortunately, their proposed new approach to AG racing didn't turn out as they expected. They didn't even finish a race in their first 2 seasons and were constantly complaining that the state of the tracks didn't suit their racing style. This earned them the scorn of every other team, and the project was terminated in 2140 following a balloon accident that caused the death of Burns. He swallowed one at a children's party. Once Great Britain had broken away from Pfizer following the fall of the F9000, they were determined to show that they could stand alone against them on the AG circuit. The logical choice was to resurrect Icarus, but this time to develop it as a fully fledged team as opposed to a businessman's pet project. Under the leadership of Connor Burns, the grandson of the original founder, they developed an FX300 craft that could not only stand out from the other teams, but could confidently give Piranha a run for their money. Skilled pilots were hard to come by at the time, especially those mad enough to fly such a fast craft with minimal shielding. However, Burns confidently proclaimed that the others will have to catch us first. The FX400 marks Icarus's establishment as a solid team on the circuit. The Icarus operation of 2207 is a different animal entirely. Well drilled, and despite their modest budget, their speed is blinding. The only other chassis with the same kind of top end is that of Piranha, and even their expertise can't help them match the Icarus in terms of acceleration. With the development of their Fury prototype pushing the thrust and handling even further, there is little that can keep up with them. Vanuba Racing Development. Vanuba were formed in 2143 in Germany by a former AG world champion Wolfgang Vanuba, who was always reputed to respect what he called the divine purity of the race. During his time as an AG racer, Vanuba rarely resorted to weapons and always tried to defeat his opponents in a fair race. Of course, this did hamper his performance at times, but it did not stop him becoming world champion. His motivation to see another team do the same in the F9000 in a new era of aggressive racing led him into development. Rather than join Faisar's development team, he sought to branch out on his own and set up an AG team that respected the same ideals. Hiring up-and-coming starlet Nami Mishima as second pilot made Vanuba one of the more popular teams in the F9000, but they were frequently caught up in the mid-pack through their adherence to Vanuba's principles. Vanuba made the transition to the FX300 following the collapse of the league, and entered an incredibly agile variant of their F9000 craft. Still light on shields, Vanuba continued to adhere to his old principles of racing the right way. But while they enjoyed moderate success during this era, the company eventually folded. Paramount International. Formed in 2177, Haramount are an international peace organisation hailing from Malaysia who are competing in the AG leagues for the first time. Unlike the other teams, Haramount are using the FX300 as a platform for their eco-restoration campaign, and all winnings from races go into funding these projects. Surprisingly, for a completely new team with no history within the sport, they performed surprisingly well, with their agile lightweight craft producing several respectable finishes along the way. However, their initial endeavour into AG racing was not to last. They withdrew at the end of the FX300 series to focus their attention on another of their global projects, to repopulate suitable parts of the world with genetically engineered tigers. This of course did not remove Haramount from the limelight. While it was not clear whether this was simply a publicity stunt or a valiant attempt to reintroduce the world to an animal that had been extinct for a century and a half, it certainly gained welcome media attention for the team. Ultimately, this fueled their desire to return to the FX400 League. Aside from their tiger cloning efforts, the latest Haramount biofuel-powered craft looks to be a marked improvement upon its predecessor during pre-season testing, sporting strong top-end speed and handling, which could see them challenging for top spots in both the FX350 and FX400 championships. And their Fury prototype could serve to show the world just how powerful biofuels can be. Even if Haramount failed to reach the lofty heights of the larger teams, they're still satisfied that their efforts could help produce a better, cleaner world. Triakis Industries. Formed in 2132, Triakis are a worldwide conglomerate of weapon manufacturers with their base of operations located in Australia. With little business in what's become an era of peace, Triakis began supplying the AG leagues with weapons before developing a craft to compete themselves in what they saw as the ideal way of showing off their products. Their craft was based off of one of their most recent grav tank designs, and includes a reverse inertia deceleration system designed to combat the heavy weights and make it easier to maintain speed through the corners. As a result of this, Triakis made a massive impact on the FX300 League, with slower craft being unable to keep up through corners and weapons almost bouncing off the near impenetrable military-grade shielding. This culminated in Triakis comfortably winning the final FX300 championship in 2206. However, the league authorities took exception to their use of the RID system. It was outlawed, and Triakis was stripped of their title, which was subsequently awarded to second-placed AG Systems. As a result of this, Triakis were forced to go back to the drawing board when it came to developing their FX350 and 400 class craft. Early tests showed a similar top-end output to the FX300 model, but as expected, the stability of the craft was now a real issue without the RID system in place due to its weight. What followed was a very shrewd move on the part of the company. Triakis noticed that Assegai were having issues with the shielding on their new craft and offered to form a partnership. Assegai traded some of their stability technology in exchange for what Triakis knew about shielding, and both craft were soon ready for competition. While Triakis' new model was still fairly cumbersome, it did manage to keep its position well. However, the Fury prototype currently being tested in the FX350 has taken Assegai's technology to the limit, offering a significant improvement in handling while increasing the machine's speed even further. Triakis are quickly moving back up through the ranks. After all, having a heavily armoured tank hurtling up behind you is enough to make anybody watch their back. EGX Technologies. EGX are an amalgamation of two of the most prominent teams from the F9000 era, EGR Technologies and Xios International. EGR were no strangers to controversy. Not since Piranha re-entered the league did a team cause such an uproar within the race commission. Absolutely nothing was known about EGR other than their origins in China, and judging by the look of their pilots and the technologies they used, this seriously concerned the league authorities, as it was unknown whether they were operating within the boundaries of league rules, or for that matter human rights. They invoked every rule in the book to keep their information to themselves, and every attempt by the race commission to extract information from them failed. Their pilots, Paul Chung and Alex Rees, were heavily augmented, and it was unknown whether they were operating under their own free will. Xios were formed in Finland in 2135, and were most notable for their weapons development prior to their foray into AG racing, and it was no surprise that the Xios craft had the most powerful weapon systems on the circuit. They got off to a flying start in their first few seasons in the F9000. With Maurice Dupree heading their AG development project, they were able to create some of the finest AG craft ever to see the circuit, and immediately found themselves competing with the likes of Piranha and Oricom. They held a particular dislike for Oricom's self-righteous posturing, and were notably ungracious about poaching Natasha Belmondo from them. Their dominance in the league was well noted, with a win record easily rivaling Piranha. The collapse of the F9000 caused both EGR and Xios to completely disappear for many years. Whether they were involved in the race fixing or money laundering behind the scenes remains unknown. However, to everyone's surprise, they returned in 2172 under the new name EGX. They were something of an unknown quantity going into the inaugural season of the FX350 League, but it turned out that they were more than ready to go racing, scoring a number of high-placed finishes with relative ease for a team that did not contest in the FX300 League. Opting not to release data from pre-season testing for the FX400, the performance of the EGX chassis has only been seen by those quick enough to catch a glimpse of the sleek ship as it was put through its paces. Still relative newcomers to the new generation of AG racing following their long absence, they look to be strong contenders. Mirage. Mirage are the newest addition to the AG Racing League, entering competition for the first time in the FX 350 and 400 events. Formed in 2202 by the wealthy sand baron Sheikh Mani Zayed, the Mirage team are the racing division of the Mirage Anti-Gravity Excellence Centre outside Dubai. They field elite pilots who have graduated from the centre's developmental programme. Rather than specialise their Mantis craft in any way, they've decided to make it a jack of all trades, performing equally well in all areas. It's the kind of racecraft where the pilot will make all the difference. With the latest iteration of the Maglock track technology also being a product of the Excellence Centre Labs, Mirage are expected to get off to a quick start in the FX 400 League, especially after their strong showing in pre-season testing and clinical performances in the FX 350 League events.